Good morning. It's Wednesday. Nic Lee, Guam EPA. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Chris.
Right
good morning,
on.
Sabrina.
Good morning, Guam EPA. Right on. Nick, so before we get started, were you still doing the whole jig thing?
Yes,
Yep.
that's correct.
Yep.
Still doing the jig thing.
And so, as you guys may recall, if you've been with us for the pandemic, Nic Lee is the PIO for the Guam EPA, Guam Environmental Protection Agency. But a lot of the PIOs and other staff were detailed over to the Joint Information Center just to assist with the dissemination of information during the pandemic. And so you're still JIC Nick, right? Nick from the JIC?
Yes, and now Nick with the FIC with public health. Yep. There's too many icks. There's too many icks.
What is the FIC?
I think that stands for Public Health Incident Command Center.
Oh, so PH. Got it.
PH, yes.
Right on. But you still do EPA stuff.
Yes, my day job is still with the Guam Environmental Protection Agency. We are in the swing of things again. Obviously, around this time last year, not really able to do much in the way of our agency mandates. This year, things are different. They're better for the most part. I mean, we're still cautious about how we conduct our business, absolutely. But we've got some movement in terms of compliance and enforcement out of our water pollution control program. So I do want to thank you guys for giving the agency the opportunity to share that information with the community. There were 2 notices of violations issued earlier this month. These 2 NOVs were issued relative to a project site in Manilao. Short end of it is that there's a project site approximately 2 acres in size. Earth moving activities were being conducted without proper permits, and so that type of activity has to be regulated. There's requirements that the responsible party does have to meet in terms of ensuring that soil erosion and sediment control is performed on the site. So every project manager has to properly manage stormwater runoff from their construction site, especially when you start earth moving activities. There are additional requirements that the project manager or the responsible party is going to have to ensure if the size of that project is 1 acre or more. So if you're 1 acre or more, you get the feds involved, and you do have to file something known as a notice of intent, along with filing for a general construction plan permit with US EPA. And so if your project size is 1 acre or more, you are also liable for the federal regulations on stormwater control measures, not just the local ones through GovGuam. So I believe May 10 or May 11, EPA inspectors observed the earth moving activities on this project site in Manilao. They've determined that the earth moving activities were not being done with a permit. They also observed that there were no best management practices, BMPs for short, that were installed on the project site to ensure that if in the events of rain events, there's no guarantee that the stormwater runoff from that project site is going to be properly managed, and that's a big issue because you now run the risk of having sediment. Anything that was in that soil will eventually make its way into the storm drains, and you could compromise water quality standards, obviously, with that. So we do need to make sure that everybody who engages in that type of activity does have the permit. We do have inspectors that go out even after you've met all the permit requirements. You've installed all of your BMPs. Inspectors still make routine trips just to ensure that you're complying with the permit conditions. In this case, uh, the responsible party or the respondent was notified that.
Sorry, Nick, I'm just looking at your
Okay.
website here. So
Sure.
you guys pinged there were three recent notice of violation issued. One on April 28th to City Hill Company Guam Limited, May 20th, this is all this year, JT
Mhm.
Pacific Development, and May 13th, Primo's Heavy Equipment. So which case are we talking about here?
Okay, so in this case, I'm talking about both JT Pacific Development and Primo's Heavy Equipment. These are the two respondents that are related to that 2-acre project site in Manilao.
So Primo's was contracted by JTI Pacific Development, right? Is that right?
That's correct. Yes.
To do the you said earth moving.
Earth moving activity.
Are we
yeah,
talking
the
about
and
clearing?
grading.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you could, Nick, just tell us, layman's terms, why it's important to get you guys involved when a company is doing something as simple as clearing land.
You know, from the outside, it looks pretty simple, but when you start changing elevations or changing slopes, and I'm going to preface this by telling you I'm not an engineer, right? But when you start altering those types of features on a property, you then change the dynamic on how water is going to flow off of that property. And so if it's not properly managed, I mentioned before, anything coming out of that project site soil now poses a risk of getting onto the roadways. It poses a risk of getting into the storm drain and then negatively impacting Guam's water quality standards. The other issue too, you know, when I spoke about the notice of intent and the general construction plan permit, there are other requirements that are associated with the size of that property. The feds will want to make sure that you are complying with two major components, namely the Endangered Species Act, so that you're not disrupting any endangered species that are you know that we keep watch over. And the other thing also is the historic preservation aspect of it. Property that size, you know, you're the likelihood of finding something of historical reference
Right,
is heightened, and we want to make sure that you go through the proper phases in ensuring that you're not unsettling anything. So those are also major components of having to comply with the federal requirements.
Where is the site in Manila, and what exactly what are the plans for this property? What are they clearing?
I don't have the information on what the project plans are, but I believe there's this GTA substation. I want to say it's headed towards Price. If you're going southbound, it's headed towards Price Elementary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. And so
I mean, if you guys think, if you have some time and you're along Route 10, you can't miss it. I mean, it's a huge clearing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you guys went out there May 11th.
Yeah.
Noticed that they realized they didn't have a permit. You told them to stop. Then a couple days later, you officially gave them this stop work order.
Stop work order.
And they were
Mhm.
supposed to stop. Then they Guam EPA went back on the 17th.
4
and they
days.
they were still doing work, clearing. And then you went back again on the 18th, and they were still doing work. And then the
Yes.
notice of violation was issued on the 20th. So that kicks in, you know, certain time frames that they're supposed to meet, you know, come into compliance. And so, let's see, 5 days later, they were supposed to submit something? Or within 7 days?
So there's something called an after the fact permit,
Mhm.
because the work already started, or the activity already started without an official permit being issued from DPW. You then have to go obtain something called an after the fact permit, and that didn't take place either. So it seems that it's reasonable that the respondent, you know, had a refusal to comply with everything. So the notice of violation was issued to both the I guess the project developer and the contractor who was performing the earth moving work.
Yeah, so that's within 15 days of receipt of this order. I'm
Right,
sorry,
so-
7 days. Within 7 days receipt of this order. So that would be tomorrow, right? If this was issued on the 20th, the notice of violation.
The developer received the notice on the 20th, and the developer's contractor received their notice on the 15th of this month. I'm sorry, the 13th.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys get that a
Right.
lot where you come into a place and you tell a company on May 13th to stop work. You go
Mhm.
back, 4 days later, they're still working. You give them the official notice. You go back the next day, they're still working, you're not in compliance.
In most cases, the project site manager or the developer will comply. I can't speak on behalf of the respondent as to why there was no immediate compliance. And I haven't been with the agency very long, but this is something I haven't seen something like this where there's multiple occasions where a stop order, whether it's written or verbally issued, was ignored. And these are all requirements on the Guam Soil Erosion and Sediment Control Regulations.
Right.
So, this is all public law, right? I mean, every developer, everybody who is going to engage in this activity, nobody gets special treatment. You have to go through this. You have to follow these regulations.
So did Primos comply with the notice of violation?
I haven't heard of any. Non-compliance from the inspectors or from the water pollution control.
They did
programs.
actually not comply.
Well, I mean,
Yeah, further
after
non-compliance.
Right, yeah.
Let's look at the penalty
So-
order here, Nick. It says based on the foregoing violation. So, guys, if you go on the Guam EPA website, it's epa.guam.gov, and there was a bill that eventually became public law that was introduced by Speaker Therese Terlahi, and this requires the Guam Environmental Protection Agency to post publicly notices of violation. So you can go on their website, and they've got them all going back a couple of years. Really interesting to read these things. So it says here in the penalty order, and it's basically how it works is the notice of violation, the form, if you guys do get a chance to pop it up and read it, is it'll start with the violation, and it'll give a little background. Then they'll give like the history of when the Guam EPA people went out to a site and kind of like the interaction they had with the people there. And then it goes on to the penalty order, which is where where you kind of get an idea of how much they may be fined. And the administrator, Nick, has a lot of wiggle room, right, in terms of what and how much of these penalties he chooses to levy, right?
Wiggle room, yeah. I wouldn't necessarily call it that. We do recognize that the respondent does have a right to appeal. There is due process. We take a look at how many times you've been on record committing some type of environmental infraction. We do look at your willingness to comply with the orders. We do look at how you choose to rectify the situation. In most cases, if you are non-committal to reversing any damage that you've done or complying with Guam's rules and regulations, you could stand to reason that you're not going to get any much consideration in the way that a penalty order is going to be issued to you. So I think that's more of an apt description on that. We've had respondents in the past who are very compliant, who want to do the right thing, who recognize their errors, and as a result of that, it was reflected in the penalty order. no one gets away scot-free from their penalty orders unless you're really running away from the law. Yeah.
But I mean, the reason why I
just-
asked is because I did a whole bunch of stories on these notices of violation, and this is under former Governor Calvo. The administrator was Eric Palacios, and there was a lot of wiggle room. It's like you would have a violator facing a potential fine, you know, of $100,000, and they would get off the hook by renovating the bathroom at Guam EPA. So I hope none of that's still going on. But just going back to what we're talking about here, there's a penalty order, and it says GEPA is imposing a total civil penalty amount of $10,000 per violation per day. The proposed $10,000 penalty is being assessed for all 5 violations over the time period starting with GEPA's stop work order on May 13th through May 18th, when respondent was reminded for the 3rd time of the stop work order, for a total of 6 days. For 5 total violations over a period of 6 days, the amount $300,000 penalty. And so to me, that's the moral of the story, right? I mean, clearing land, you have a company here that just ignored basically the stop work order, and they're now facing a $300,000 fine.
Well, that's by the calculation. Now, there's another stipulation in the regulations that limit Guam EPA's authority to fine of no more than $125,000. So that $300,000 figure is based on the calculations for the duration of the activity, along with the statutory maximum per day amount. But in total, the maximum civil penalty that is authorized by the act is $125,000. And so this is kind of similar to the story you guys did, I think in 2019 with Smithbridge. Chris, I think that was your story.
Yeah.
Where if you ran the calculations, multiplied the duration by the maximum penalty amount, it came out to like $900,000. But we don't have that. We don't have that authority to assess that type of penalty order. The maximum that the agency can dole out is $125,000.
Well, hopefully some of these senators are listening. Work on that.
Right.
Nick, there was one other NOV. We're kind of running out of time here, but there was one other NOV that you guys had, right?
Well, I was just going to provide you an update with
Go ahead.
with the Smithbridge one, but I know Glenn did mention that he's going to issue NOV. I can't give too many specifics, but I know it involves junk vehicles. So as soon as that's cleared legal and has been issued, we can get back on this again, or I can send you guys a copy, or let you know when it's officially posted on the website. Yeah.
So that was based on an investigation that you guys conducted. So where exactly is the site?
I'm sorry, Bree, I don't have the specifics, but I can get with Glenn once he gives me the final signed notice of violation. I'd love the opportunity to talk about it with you guys.
Okay.
What was the City Hill NOV, Nick?
That one, the Army Corps actually got involved with that one.
Yeah, I see this.
Yeah. So there was it was relative to some type of structure that was not in compliance with the Clean Water Act. That has to be issued by the federal government. We just put that there just for community awareness. But that's something being handled by the Army Corps of Engineers and US EPA.
Right on, Nick. Thank you for your time. It's Nick
Right
from the JIC and the FIC, and also Guam EPA. It's his side hustle now.
All right, guys. You have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, too. Take care.
Right on.